There were almost everything was an inconception on the coverage, especially on the social media and that side of it. The glaring one that stands out was the whole issue of self-defense. Out here, they made a big issue of the self-defense as if that had an effect on the trial. Actually, we went according to the jury instructions from the judge and the printed. Self-defense had nothing to do with any of our deliberations, because the rule was that we first had to, until we voted on a conviction of a guilty on one of the charges, we weren't even to consider the idea of self-defense. All the deliberations were about, did the prosecution prove each element of the charge? That's another misconception. The vote was actually 11-1 for not guilty. That was within minutes after the first vote we took in the beginning. It was 11-1, and we spent the next 2 hours either one side trying to convince the other, and that's why after 2 hours of trying to come to a resolution is when we realized we were deadlocked on that one charge. I think what it was is because it was such a serious charge, and what happened was one young unarmed man got stabbed in the heart and killed. And that just, your first impression is murder. And that was the impression that it was awfully hard to get over, that it, even though it was a terrible thing, when we looked at the elements that had to be proved for a murder charge, it just didn't fit at all. And so it took some time. Matter of fact, early that following morning, it might have been even overnight when that person changed their mind. I can't speak to that. But the first thing the following morning when we resumed deliberations is when it was unanimous that it was not guilty on murder. Some of the elements early on were fixed, were definite, that there was a weapon. He did use a weapon. He was the only one that had one, so he must have caused everything. And like you were saying, that the disagreement was, what was his intention at the time he actually did the actions? And those words are pretty descriptive. Was it intentional? Did he really mean to do all those things at that time? Or was he just being, what the word they use is extreme indifference? Was he extremely indifferent to what might happen if he did those things? And that's what the other 11 hours of deliberation was all about.
And was the deadlock on the charges you remained deadlocked on at the end of the deliberations, were those 11-1 as well, or were they all different? Or
yeah, when we went back into the courtroom, it was all 11-1 on every charge.
Was it the same holdout as the?
No, a different person.
Oh, okay.
And the deadlock was 11 guilty, 1 not guilty. That's hard to say. I mean, I did say it was important just to get another point of view, his point of view. And I think maybe the only difference might have been the intentional reckless part of the deliberations. I think we would have come to the same conclusions, but just wouldn't have been intentional, or reckless is where we would have been held up on.
And was there the same instruction on the extremely indifferent or reckless charges regarding self-defense? In other words, if you had gotten to guilty on those, would you have then considered self-defense at that point?
Right, and yeah, we completely didn't even think about self-defense unless and until we came to a guilty verdict on one of the counts. And so there was the whole pages and pages of instructions on self-defense that we never even got to. I wouldn't say one, but I would say what was more important or relevant to us were the ones that couldn't be denied. It was the Ring camera doorbell footage, the cell camera footage, the testimony from the medical experts as to the nature and the causes of the wounds. What we really struggled with, like I said, there was so much testimony, and so much of it was contradictory or inconclusive, so that's the part that we really had to go through, and seriously consider what was and what wasn't the truth. But there wasn't any one thing that stood out over the others. Yeah, it's a part of it, and again, the fact that he brought a knife would have to do with the argument about intentional or reckless. And part of that is there was a lot of conflicting testimony about, did he ask for the knife? Did he know whether it was a knife? Or during the altercation in between, did someone just throw the knife to him? And there was a lot of conflicting testimony on that point. And so we really couldn't come to a conclusion whether he even knew there was a knife before it was thrown to him. And so we really couldn't use, we know we had one, but that's about all we could definitely tell about the knife.
When the prosecutor, I think it was on the cross-examination, he asked him about reaching into his pocket and then unfolding it, like the fact that he had to take it out and unfold it. Did that play any part in the discussion of intent or any of the deliberations?
No, we talked about that a little bit, but some of the people indicated that it's not, you don't have to make a certain effort to open that knife. It could be done in a fraction of a second. And so the fact that he had to open the knife really didn't come into it, especially on the James McGrath case, because he already had the knife and it was already open before that part of it even began to happen. And that was the issue, that we had the testimony reread to us, Raul's testimony, and it hung on what did he know about Tyler Da Silva, his friend at the time. Did he know that Tyler Da Silva was out of danger and on the street, or did he? The last thing he said about seeing Tyler Da Silva was he was still on the ground getting beaten on, and so part of that was, and he said he wasn't going to leave his best friend there. And so, did he know that Tyler Da Silva was out of danger, or did he have no idea where Tyler Da Silva was and he was going back for that reason? And so that was never conclusive either about what he knew about Tyler Da Silva at the time.
But, and just to clarify, that's only with respect to his intent too, because you're not saying it was self-defense of Tyler Da Silva
or not even self-defense, but
defense of others.
The whole process there. Yeah, it did, not in a big way, because not even being aware of that before the trial started, and it was actually the prosecution who brought up the fact that, and how those deals all happened. And so even according to our instructions, we were to consider it as far as the credibility of their testimony, but just because they got a deal, they were still required to tell the truth. And so it was a factor, but not a really significant one. It wouldn't have changed, I think, our decision one way or another.
And in terms of the rest of the witnesses, was it just a case of trying to piece together what was common among all of them and what you could confirm through other means like the ring camera and medical testimony?
Yeah, some of it could be confirmed, corroborated, and some of it was conflicting. It was also, it just seemed to us that a lot of the testimony on the questions that could have been a thing for Valle, they had pinpoint, they realized everything. And on the other questions where it might not have supported the case, they didn't know. And so that seemed to be a factor also, that not all that testimony, even though there was a lot of it may not have been believable. Yeah, I think even without the witnesses that said they actually saw it, we really knew he did stab him. And again, the question is did he know or think or mean to actually kill him when he did that? And the conclusion was that it couldn't have been.
And was there any single piece of evidence or anything that or his testimony that you found in common in finding that conclusion? Or
between his testimony and even the testimony of the medical experts, that in order to kill him with that one stabbing, he would have had to hit him in the heart, and the heart being about the size of a fist, he would have had to known which ribs he had to go through, and that the knife had to go straight into the body. And the idea that anyone, even not in a chaotic situation like that, who would know exactly where you had to do it to accomplish that? And also the other thing was for the murder charge, he would have had specifically meant to kill Jimmy McGrath, not anyone else. And we just didn't think that was, he wasn't going for Jimmy McGrath, he was going for someone. Yeah, I think I said before, the most disappointing thing for us is that we couldn't come to a conclusion. And the fact that we couldn't change that one mind. And I would hate to see anyone have to go through this again. But yeah, and again, one of the kind of misconceptions was when you saw the headlines in the paper, all you saw was not guilty. And it wasn't we were saying that he was not guilty, just those specific crimes weren't proved. And so, you know, I apologize again. That's the one thing that got to us all, is that we couldn't get to that final conclusion.